Hey Saber fans, Tony from Sabers, and today we're going to teach you how to build a Neopixel Lightsaber blade. Now please like and comment if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer below. Hope you enjoy the video, so let's get right into it. So first we're going to go through all the tools and parts you'll need to build a Neopixel lightsaber. So we've got a 34-inch polycarbonate blade. You can get these from the custom saber shop. Most of these parts are going to be from the custom saber shop, but I'll make sure to get specifically where they came from. We've got a 1-inch diffuser foam, the V2. I got this also from the custom saber shop. Now you only get you about 36 inches, so you have to cut it to your liking, and I'll show you how I do it in the video later on. We've got 2 Neopixel strips. Now these are the WS2811. I don't remember the specific name, but they're the normal Neopixel strips you get. They have 144 per meter. You will need 2 of those, so we have 2 here. And then we've got your solder, your handy dandy flux. We've got a blade PCB, which I'll go into depth about that later, and where to get that if you need the resistor soldered on already or not. We've got a blade tip, the blade adapter. We've got a handy dandy solder gun. We got electrical tape. Now as tools go as well, we've got scissors, wire strippers, and little like snips, which is very handy. And I think that kind of covers most of it, so let's get into it. So first, you're going to want to check your foam and see what length you get. Usually they come in like 36, and so you're going to need about 1/4 of an inch from the actual end of your 34 or whatever length you want to do, 34-inch in my case, blade. And so to do that, I kind of do like half of your thumb length to get the exact like 1/4 of an inch there, and then just snip it off, and then that should be good for the thing. Now make sure when you're snipping it that the end of your other blade is flush with the end, and so it'll be right there. So yeah. Now the other thing to do is I'll get some of these tools out of the way first before I get too big into it. Okay, you're gonna want to unwind these bad boys. But first be careful because sometimes they hook on to the side. You want to unhook them first and then undo it. Now, recently they've updated these, so instead of having a brown back to them, they have a blue back to them, which is very different. The adhesive that they use on the back of these strips kind of changed, but either way, it'll still work for what we need. Okay, this is your pixel strip, all 144 pixels. We're gonna set that down temporarily and do the other one. Now, I actually learned from a guy called Megtusith, Rob. He does a really good job explaining this too, so if I do a decent job, you can go watch his video as well. And he did his a while back, so I want to make sure that for those that are watching and stuff, that this also applies to, I guess, the newest versions of Profi and stuff, because when he did it, it was mainly for CFX, and Neopixel wasn't as popular back then. So, okay. First things first, what you're going to want to do, since this is a 34-inch blade, it's going to have 124 pixels. So what you want to do is count 20 pixels from the top. And one important part is you want to make sure that the arrows are pointing up. So when you're coating them, the flow of the saber on and off will go up and down. If you do it the other way, it'll ignite from the tip of the blade, which will be really, really weird. So from the end, you're going to want to count 20, and that'll give you the 120 pixels. So I kind of put my thumb there and double check, and I count again. Okay, so then after that you want to cut them. Now it's better to, if you think you miscounted, to cut a pixel above, so you have an extra pixel to cut from if you did count or accidentally messed up your counting. And so yeah. Yes, in that case, I would have messed up. So, get your handy dandy scissors. I'll stretch this across here. You want to cut right here, right between where the black line is. And that'll also give you your solder points and such. Now, this extra pixel strip, you won't necessarily need it. I usually use it to have like a blade plug if you need it illuminated that you don't have stock Neopixels, or if you have like crossguard blades, you can kind of probably use these. But right now, we don't need them, so I'm going to set them aside. Now that we've got one blade done, we're going to do it to the other. Again, make sure that your arrows are pointing up, and then we're going to count 20. messed up my counting. But those the arrows specifically, you can see them right there. Again, you want those facing up so you can cut the ones that are pointing up. Okay, back to counting. So sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Okay. Now, the best way to, when you're doing pixels and stuff for CFX or Profi, that's the best way to tell. So once you know how much pixels you have here on the strip that's discarded, you can either count these. Right now, I've done this so many times that I know it's going to be 124 pixels, and so I don't have to really count or anything. But if you're ever curious about other blades that you've built or blades that other people have done, you can count how many strips you have by how many strips you've cut off out of 44. So. Okay, making sure I didn't make an error in this, because that would be awkward on a film. Okay. Now your pixels should be the same length. Yes. And so, yeah. And double check if you, again, afraid you miscounted. The best way to tell, if I can get these lined up, is you can line up the ends of these, like so. And then stretch all of them across, roll the very end, and they should be the same length. If not, then I cut a pixel too long, which looks like what I did here. So you can easily see the blue sticking out. So I need to cut 1 pixel shorter than I originally counted. That's just one way to kind of keep yourself honest and be like, no. Some people do these staggered. I don't do them staggered as much. With these, I put them right beside each other. And staggered, there's kind of like an inconsistency when it comes to blasters and lockup and stuff. It's not as lined up. So now that we've got it trimmed the way we want to, let me get this situated. We can cut off this piece here. And so, handy dandy knife. And we want to open this up. What you want to do is try to cut off, because we don't need these wires here. That's something we don't need, these wires here. So what we're going to do is cut this heat shrink off. And so we're going to cut into it. And we want to cut the wires that we don't use. You don't want to cut into the wires that you are going to use, because that could potentially cause problems. And so, and you want to tear this thing off, like so. Sometimes they're harder to get off, sometimes they fall right off, sometimes they put the tape or adhesive over it, so you got to kind of work with it. But there we go, and it takes right off. Okay. Now you don't need these 2 wires, so the best thing to do is get your handy dandy snips, go in, move this blade here for now, and snip right there where the extra wire is. I don't need that. And same with the negative wire. Okay, now that you've got your exposed wires here, you're going to want to figure out how long you want your wires to be. Now, usually with me, I don't go longer than my thumb. If anything, I go about half my thumb width. And so it's about a ½ an inch out from the base of the Neopixel. So get the handy dandy scissors, about a ½ an inch, and cut. Boom. Now, another handy dandy thing is after you cut them, then you can slice them so they're individual. So, bam, and bam, and then your all 3 of them are even. Now you want to do the same thing for the other side. So we're going to set this one aside here, and get this one, and do the same thing. So cut along the heat shrink here. See if that worked. See, yeah, for some reason they've been doing that. The adhesive sticks on over the thing. It used to be that the heat shrink was after, ironically. Makes it more difficult when taking off these things. Okay. Alright, and then get your handy dandy snips. Cut off the extra wires. Now, some people in MadCal video and such, you can glue after you solder everything you need. You can put hot glue on here to add more support, because sometimes these are the points that break, the solder points that break. And so for this video, we don't really need it. Both solder joints are actually pretty nice, so we're not going to need to do that. So about ½ an inch, or if you want to be more consistent, you can take your other roll, your other Neopixel, line it up, and cut it evenly with your last batch that you cut. And so that's what I find easiest to do, is to go up here, and cut right where your other ones are. Right, even. Okay, now these extra wires you won't need, and so we shall discard them. And then, now that these are prepped and ready, we're going to move to the Neopixel PCB. So, this is the PCB, your blade PCB that you'll need. You can get it from the Custom Saber shop. Now, this one already has the pre-soldered resistor on there, and so it's that little square right there that says 306 or 603. So I don't know, I should read it. 603. And so that's the resistor or resistance you'll need on every single Neopixel blade you have. Sometimes on the builds you'll have the Neopixel resistor in the data line inside the hilt. But for most of my builds, I always include them on the blade, and so you don't have to worry about it. If you do have a saber that doesn't have resistance on the data line, then you don't have to worry about it. Now, what you're going to want to do is pre-solder all your soldered joints, and so you'll have to. It's only 6 solder points on the data pad that you have to pre-solder. So apply solder. There. Oh, turn my heat up a bit on the solder gun. There we go. Rotate. Now, if you're not interested in building your own blade, there are already pre-made blades built on the Custom Saber shop, but I do have to warn you that they are the 264 pixels from KR Sabers. So make sure that your config file, or if you can edit your blade style to have 264 pixels. I've had a few customers that bought from them, and I coded lightsabers for them, and they're like, it only ignites half the blade. Half the blade. And that's because it's 264 pixels, not 144. Okay, now that all of those have been soldered very nicely, you can now strip these bad boys. And, well, actually, before we strip anything, I think we're going to have to attach these boys together. That's probably the best thing to do next. So move everything out of the way. Make sure you have enough space. Now, this is the best part, or I guess the most tedious part, because these things do not want to stay straight. And so you're going to want to kind of bend them to make sure that they're straight and that they lay flat. And then you want to tear off one of the sticky sides from one of the Neopixels. In this case, I'm just going to choose this one. And we're going to try to use it. Now, with the new sticky adhesive that it has, it's kind of hard to separate the blue from the adhesive. But from the pixel strip from the adhesive, it's actually a lot easier. Now, you can do this as slow or as fast as you want to. I've seen that slow works a lot better than fast. But you just slowly take off the adhesive, bit by bit. You want to be careful, because right here is where the strip solders to another strip, and that kind of causes problems later when attaching the Neopixels together, because it causes a bump, a road bump in the thing, because the pixels don't line up perfectly. And so there's some ways to fix that. Usually half the time when it happens, you'll have to just press pretty hard. The older ones used to be worse. They just have huge solder points that kind of overlapped, which were really bad. But now it's not as bad. Okay, so we're going to set this here for now, and then we're going to do this one. Now this one's, we're going to use the adhesive, so we're going to use our handy dandy knife to separate the blue from the adhesive here, if we can. It's kind of tricky, but once you get it, you're good. Try to choose one of the corners. That's what tends to work best. Oh, it doesn't want to do it. Of course, when you're like recording a video for this, it doesn't want to do it. There we go. Just a smidge. There we go. Now, before you do all of it, you want to line up this pixel with the other pixel. So we're going to straighten this guy out a bit. And then you want to get your other pixel. Now, the trick is to lay it on a flat surface, like so. Move all this out of the way real quick. And you want to make sure that each one is laying flat on the ground. For this, usually you put electrical tape right where this solder point is here. I'll show on this camera. You want to put a solder point right there. But because the tape on here covers those solder points, you don't have to necessarily put those there. On the older ones, they didn't usually come with, well, electrical tape or the adhesive right over that part of the thing. So For that, we don't have to worry about it, and I just let go of this blue thing, so it's stuck now. Again, handy dandy knife. Okay, back in business. Okay, so let me get this situated. Okay. So once it's on a leveled surface, you want to apply it so the things are even. So pixel to pixel every time. So the first one's always the best one. And now slowly, while you rip off the plastic piece to the adhesive, you want to slowly press them together and making sure that you're level on the flat surface. So the pixels are even and the strips are even together. And just piece by piece, just slowly get it together. When building a Neopixel Lightsaber, this is probably the easiest part. Now, one of the benefits of these type of pixels is that you can cut them. With the KR Saber pixels, they only go to 264 pixels. You can't cut them or modify them at all, which is somewhat a bad thing. If you have that many more pixels, you should be able to modify them as you want, but it doesn't recommend you cut them. With these, you can cut them and they're perfectly fine because they're individual. Now this is the hump that I was talking about right here where the solder points are. You can kind of see where the Neopixel kind of strayed away compared to the other one, but it's still very even despite that having that little road bump. It's gotten a lot better with these pixels than it has in the past. I had some that end up becoming back and forth and not parallel with each other because of the dissonance on that solder point there. And you can always go back and resolder them if the joint's bad like that. In this case, it wasn't bad at all. So. All right, near the end, keep it straight. Now, before we get to the end and just rip it off, this is also where you would want to put electrical tape so you don't accidentally fry your pixel strip. And so you do have extra tape there, but for extra security, I'm going to put some there just in case, because the tip is also something that you cut later to have that tip and stuff. Thank you for your patience. Cut yourself a handy dandy strip of this. You don't need much, it's just kind of a centimeter or so of just tape. It's just got to cover those solder joints. So here. Now I'll show you on this camera here. So those 3 solder points that you see right there that are exposed, you want to just cover them just enough, and then you can put these 2 together like so. Now what you can do from here is just snip the extra electrical tape, and then what you want to do is, you see the little circle right by the resistor, you can cut a 45-degree angle, but don't cut into the resistor circle, just cut right beside the line there, and then you can do it on the opposite side here as well. Here, I'll show you on this camera here because you can see it better, but right there on the black line there, you can trim there. And then you don't want to trim too much off, but you can trim the axis there just so you can see a little bit of a black strip, so make sure that it doesn't have contact. So alright, now that both pixels are together, you can now go back and solder your connector, your PCB connector on there. So, got that out of the way, Now this, I believe, is 22 gauge wire. Oh, you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to separate the second wires on the second Neopixel strip. It's essential. Whoop. Usually I would use my Batman knife. That is currently not here. There we go. Now all wires are separated and fantastic. So now we need to strip them, dip them, and solder them. So, or what Shamim would say, grip them, strip them, dip them. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to strip them, each one individually. Okay, those are those 3 done. Now you want to solder those. Oh, you want to solder them afterwards. But next 3, so strip. Yeah, that's good. Now for these, you don't need too much stripped off, enough to just make solder contact. You don't need a whole bunch of them. When soldering wires together, you would need a bit more length, just so you make sure the connection is solid. With this, the holes on the Neopixel connector aren't that big, so the solder points on these aren't going to be that big either. So, yeah, very nice. So now what you want to do is dip all these guys in flux. This is the flux I'm currently using. I don't remember if I got this from the custom saber shop or local handy store, but it works just the same. Now you don't need a lot of flux, so I usually actually use the lid and dip these wires in flux from the lid, not the actual flux container. And so what flux does basically is it helps the solder adhere to the wire a lot better. Sometimes the wire already has flux on it. You have to know what wire you're dealing with. For this, I'm not sure if it comes with that wire fluxed already, so I'm just going to flux it even more, which there's no problem with adding flux to it. If anything, it makes your solder joint more sturdy. So, okay. Now, usually this is where you get helping hands, so you can hold the solder and put the wires in place, but I don't usually use helping hands. I can solder it myself. And so, just solder one there, solder one there. Usually with the solder, you can actually bend it the way you want to. That's why. And so, yeah. Now, of course, you want to do this in a well-ventilated area, because these fumes from the solder and the flux can be harmful. All right, now I gotta check all your solder points, make sure all of them are good. I think I'm gonna put some more in that one. But yeah, I think that should be good. So those are all 6 of the wires soldered. All very good, all very shiny. And now we're gonna apply them to this PCB. So the trick here is it's gonna be flip-flopped. So your positive is your red, your data line is your green, and your negative is your white. And so on this data pad, you'll see, let me put this up real quick so you guys can see a little better. On this data pad, they're switched. So your data, your positive and negative are switched on the opposite side. And so to humor that, on this, we have to solder them in a kind of cool way. Okay, so the cool way of doing this is, since your positive, negative, and data line are switched on the opposite side, you're going to want to go to the far right one first, and solder the Neopixel on the bottom side. And solder, make sure that your negative wires match. So negative, which is your white, your data, which is your green. Let me try to get... And you can tug on these after you solder them, make sure that's a solid joint. This one might need a bit more solder. So that's what we're gonna do. If I can get this thing up and going. There we go. So this joint here is gonna need more solder. Okay. Now to carry on. The data line's gonna be right there. Normally I would have tweezers or something to hold the wires in. There we go. Nice and solid. You can give it a tug. That's not going anywhere. And your last but not least, your positive. Now positive is a bit tricky because it's the last one and it doesn't really want to cooperate. So you can kind of bend it and push it where you want to. And then solder it down. Oh, if it wants to do what I'm saying. These wires can be pretty stubborn sometimes. The best advice I can give you is wire management when it comes to building lightsabers or blades or anything like that. It's wire management. I might turn up the heat a bit more. Cool. That's pretty solid. Okay. Now this is the cool part. So what you're going to want to do is since the Neopixel's on this side and your solder point's this side, is you kind of get to weave through your other wires and kind of make a spring type action for your pixels. So slowly but surely you're going to weave these through the other side, and then there we go. So you want to flip your Neopixel over and do the same thing. So positive, negative, and data all should be soldered to the same point. Now again, this is probably the trickier part because your wires aren't going to want to go to that area. So, okay, there's one. This is their negative line. I'm going to put more solder on this data line. Looks solid. All right, and then the last but not least, your last positive wire. Perfect. And now you can kind of see, if you press in your blade or whatever, it'll create like a spring motion. So it'll keep the wires from ripping off and all that jazz when dueling or whatever you want to do with it. And so, yeah. Now that that's all done, you're going to want to put your blade PCB holder through the Neopixel strip all the way down to the end. Now, if this doesn't snap in right away, you can file down these little extra pieces here. It's designed to do that, so it's a snug fit. It looks like I'll have to do that. For here, I don't have a file, but I can snip these through here. This is just where they broke off the PCB when they did like an assembly line. So, okay. So now clip that in. Should pop right in. Yep. And then you can take out the foam from your blade, and we're going to put the Neopixel in the foam. Okay. So now we've trimmed these edges mainly because we wanted to create a smoother way for these Neopixels to slide inside the foam, which I don't think we're going to have a problem. I never usually have a problem with these, but they should slide right in. Slowly but surely, you should be able to just slide these in. Now, if you ever get a tight spot, don't try to force it or anything, because they'll just bend the Neopixels. Try to squeeze on the blade, and then try to start messing with the foam. For this blade, it doesn't give me too much trouble. 7/8 inch blades can be pretty tricky. The new pixels can be kind of tight. And if it does get stuck about halfway, just pinch and use that as like a spring to shoot the pixel in. And then try it again. Slowly but surely. Now sometimes when you're doing that, it can stretch the foam a bit, so you might have to recut the foam after the pixels are in all the way. Okay, so right about at the end, we can probably push it the rest of the way, and we're good. And you should, at the end of the blade, have about one pixel shooting out, but as I said before, I think I stretched out the foam a bit. So we're going to put this inside the blade real quick and see how good we are with the measurements. And we might do some extra cutting. Okay, so this should just pop right in. Boop. And now you can check your blade real quick. And it looks like, yes, we've got one pixel popping out, but we need to cut some foam a bit more. which is to be expected. So, cut here. You can kind of see where your pixel is. You can cut right about below it. We've got crappy scissors on board. So now we're going to cut this extra foam off that we kind of stretched out, which happens at time to time. Voila, our pixel. So you should have about 1 pixel poking out, and that's because you want to put the parabolical tip, is what it's called, parabolic tip, and should have at the tip of the blade. I'm going to fix this kind of foam thing real quick. Cool. Alright, that's more like it. So that's what kind of should look like towards the end if you have the right cutting material or cutting tools. Now the blade should pop right in. Now before you glue anything or do anything like that, what you want to do is check the blade. And so I have a Neopixel over here that I can test it out pretty easily. So we're going to plug that in and give it a turn on. So here. And it looks like it works very well. Oh, blasters. Yeah. Animated effects. Anyways. A lot of good stuff. So now that you tested your Neopixel and make sure you don't have any terribly dead spots in the blade or anything like that, what you can do is you can glue the blade on with, glue the tip and the base of the blade on. Now, I use a gel, glue gel. It works very well. It settles very well. You don't want to use a liquidy crazy glue because then it can get everywhere on the pixels and stuff like that. I'd recommend a gel-based glue. And so, yeah. And you can glue around the base and the tip. So first you want to glue on the base. So we're going to glue the base of the blade. Now for this, you don't need a whole lot of glue. Like a little bit will do, yeah. Especially with the base of the blade. You only need it just enough. And you can kind of do a blob and then spread it around the whole base of the blade. And then basically it just snaps into place. And if you wanted to, you can probably like use... This is what I usually do, is I use the little heat shrink that we cut off earlier, and I kind of disperse the extra around the base to make it even more solid. And then it'll dry. Now, it'll only take a few seconds to dry. When you do the tip of the blade, same concept, you'll do the edge of the blade. The side here, which I'll do it off of camera, if it'll actually produce glue. Just enough, and spread it around while you go. Once you got the whole ring of it, you can just snap it into place. Just like that. And then once it dries, you've got your Neopixel blade. I hope you enjoyed this Neopixel Lightsaber build. I hope you guys learned a lot. I hope you guys can build Neopixel Lightsabers now on your own. If you have any questions about problems you'll run into or anything, I'll be happy to comment them below. Of course, have a wonderful day, and may the Force be with you.